It was past midnight, the train swaying under a sky with no stars. Alina sat near the window, trying to stay awake. She had been robbed hours earlier, her money gone, her trust shattered. Only a single coin remained, glinting in her fist like a reminder of helplessness. When an old beggar limped down the aisle, she gave him the coin without thinking. The man paused, studying her with a strange intensity before moving on. She didn't see him again until he came running back, breathless, telling her to move seats. Seconds before a hand slid under her bag, the old train rocked back and forth, creaking as if its bones were tired. Midnight hung heavy outside, no moon, no stars, just the thick blackness of rural India. Alina sat in the window seat, clutching her backpack on her lap. Hours ago, in the chaos of the crowded station, her wallet had been stolen. She still remembered the shove, the sudden emptiness in her pocket, the way her heart had sunk. Now, all she had was one small coin. A single rupee. Worth almost nothing, yet she kept it clenched in her palm as if it could anchor her in this unfamiliar night. The train smelled faintly of diesel and dust, the air heavy with the tired breathing of strangers. She told herself she would spend the coin on tea when the vendor passed by, just enough caffeine to keep her awake. She had read too many warnings about falling asleep alone on night trains. That was when she saw him. A hunched, thin old man shuffled down the aisle, his clothes worn to threads, his bare feet cracked and dusty. He carried no bag, only a tin cup that rattled with a few coins. He stopped beside her, his hand trembling slightly as he held out the cup. Alina hesitated. She needed to hold on to her last coin. It was all she had left until she reached her hotel in the morning. But something in his eyes stopped her. They weren't pleading exactly, they were searching. Studying her face in a way that made her feel seen. Without another thought, she dropped the coin into the tin. It clinked softly, the sound oddly final. The old man's lips curled into the faintest smile. Instead, he tilted his head, as though committing her face to memory, and slowly shuffled away. Alina leaned back, telling herself it was nothing, just an act of kindness, nothing more. The train swayed, the rhythm almost lulling her into sleep. She kept glancing at the dark glass of the window, her reflection pale and ghost-like. That's when she noticed him. A man in a leather jacket, tall, with sharp features, sitting 3 rows behind her. His head was turned slightly, his eyes locked on her in the reflection of the window. They didn't waver. She shifted in her seat, unease prickling her skin. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe he was just looking past her. But then the train slowed slightly, and the man leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, gaze never breaking. Her heartbeat quickened. She pulled her bag closer. Minutes later, a shuffling sound approached again. The old beggar was back, but now his eyes were sharper, more alert. He leaned toward her, his voice barely more than a breath. "Move seats," he whispered. "Now." She stared at him, confused. "Why?" His gaze flicked behind her, then back. "Because someone's hand is about to be in your bag." Before she could process, she felt it, the faintest brush against the fabric near her leg. She whipped her head around. The man in the leather jacket sat casually, his hand resting on the arm of the seat in front of him, as though nothing had happened. Her pulse thundered. Without a word, she grabbed her bag, stood up, and slid into an empty seat closer to the front of the carriage. The old beggar gave a single nod and walked away again, disappearing into the shadows between cars. For the rest of the night, she couldn't stop thinking, how had he known? The train rattled on through the night, the rhythmic clatter doing little to settle Alina's nerves. She kept glancing over her shoulder. The man in the leather jacket was still there, though now he looked away whenever her eyes met his. She hugged her backpack, feeling the faint outline of her camera inside. It was the one thing she couldn't lose, not just for her travel work, but because it held all her photos from this trip, including the charity school she had visited 2 days ago. The carriage lights flickered, plunging the train into near darkness for a few seconds. When they came back, the old beggar was gone. She waited for him to return, partly out of gratitude, partly out of a gnawing need to understand. Why had he warned her, and how had he known? As the train began to slow for a small rural stop, she saw him again, standing near the door, leaning on his tin cup like a walking stick. She made her way down the aisle, glancing nervously at the leather-jacketed man, who now seemed distracted with his phone. "Wait," she said softly when she reached the beggar. "Why did you help me?" He looked up at her, his weathered face creasing into a half-smile. "Because you helped me first." "That was just a coin," she said, almost embarrassed. "It was nothing." He shook his head. "To you, maybe. To me, it was more than you know." The train screeched to a halt. Outside, the platform was barely lit, a stray dog nosing through the trash. A few passengers got off. "I knew that man," the beggar continued, nodding toward the leather-jacketed passenger. "I've seen his face before. He rides these trains looking for people who are alone, people who fall asleep. Your coin bought my tea tonight. That tea kept me awake. And when I saw him watching you, I stayed awake for a reason." Alina felt a strange lump in her throat. "Why me?" she whispered. He studied her for a moment. "Because kindness is rare, and when you see it, you protect it." Before she could reply, the leather-jacketed man stood, pulling a small bag from the overhead rack. He stepped off onto the dim platform without looking back. The beggar began to move toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked quickly. "This is my stop," he said simply. "And so is yours." "But I'm not supposed to get off until the city," she protested. He leaned closer. "Trust me, girl, that man wasn't finished with you. If you stay on this train, you might not reach the city." Her heart thudded in her ears. She hesitated only a second before grabbing her bag and stepping off after him. The train groaned and pulled away, disappearing into the dark. They stood on the quiet platform, the night air cool against her skin. A small roadside tea stall flickered with a dim bulb. The beggar ordered 2 cups, paying with a few crumpled bills. They sat in silence for a moment before Alina finally said, "I don't even know your name." "Rafiq," he replied. "Thank you, Rafiq. I don't know what would have happened if." He raised a hand to stop her. "You don't need to know. Some debts are better left in the heart than in the mind." When the next train arrived an hour later, he didn't board. She did, waving to him as the carriage carried her away. She kept thinking about his words for the rest of the journey. In her hand, she still felt the ghost of that single coin. And she realized something: sometimes the smallest thing you give away is the one that comes back to save.